Looks like we at least have a quorum's worth, so we'll find out exactly who they are by having Sandy start off with a roll call to check our attendance.
All right, thank you, Tony. We'll start with Lolita Davis Carter. I think you're muted. I see your name. Lolita?
I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was trying
that's
to
okay.
get lost. I'm sorry. I apologize.
All right, Cecily Harris.
Present.
Todd Kemry. Todd Kemry. Bob Moeller. Jeremy Peichel.
Jeremy Peichels in attendance.
Nate Rich.
I'm here.
Anthony Taylor.
Here.
Rick Tyson.
Here.
Tony Russo.
And I am here.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. With that, we'll move on to approval of our agenda for the day as posted. We can do this by consensus, so I'll just wait a moment to see if anybody has any changes that they need to suggest. Okay, hearing none, our agenda is approved. We'll move on to approval of minutes from our November 5th, 2020 meeting. For this, we do need a motion, second, and then we'll proceed to voting on that. So if we can have a motion and second by people who are present at that meeting.
So moved.
So motion by Jeremy. Do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Cecily.
A second by Cecily. Thank you. Is there any discussion or corrections on those minutes? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a roll call vote on approval of the minutes for November 5th as presented.
Okay, thank you. Again, we'll start with Lolita Davis Carter.
I approve.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Has Todd Kemry joined us? Bob Moeller. Jeremy Peichel.
Jeremy votes aye.
Nate Rich.
Hi, I'd like to abstain since I wasn't in attendance.
Okay, Anthony Taylor.
Yes.
I think that was an I. I could barely hear him. Rick Tyson.
Aye.
Tony Russo.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So our minutes are approved. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting. I did have one sent in to me this week. Pull that up. Find my window. This was sent by Holly Jenkins on behalf of Wilderness in the City, a nonprofit organization locally. This is related to our information item at the end of the meeting about Parks and Trails Legacy Fund items. We don't have a business item on it today. They write, "It is concerning that the public is not allowed to actively participate in MPOSC meetings, and today in particular, which includes a controversial agenda item about spending of monies from the Legacy Amendment. Today, you will hear one perspective of projects being proposed for Parks and Trails legacy spending. However, you will not be asked for your recommendation because instead the final project list will be worked out between staff and the agency. The project list is vague and without adequate detail. Similar to previous years, there remains a concerning lack of transparency with regard to how the Metropolitan Regional Park System uses its portion of legacy dollars. And as more people learn how these dollars are actually being spent, there is growing opposition to the manner in which this portion of legacy dollars is being used. Much of this opposition stems from three areas: the process by which the legacy funds are distributed among the IAs, which conflicts with the guidelines provided by the 25-year Parks and Trails Legacy Plan, the lack of a credible and unbiased project approval process, and the ongoing imbalance of spending, in particular the negligence to natural resources stewardship. It is for these reasons we express our opposition to the proposed projects being recommended by the regional park implementing agencies. This topic is far too intricate to share in the allowed brief written comment limited to 250 words. As such, I encourage you to learn more by visiting the Legacy of Nature page on our website, wildernessinthecity.org. Again, that's submitted by Holly Jenkins on behalf of her organization, Wilderness in the City. Thank you for sending us that. Certainly something to keep in mind. Two things I want to point out for anybody who's relatively new to some of these processes and may not know for how those dollars are spent. There's both the things that come to some different organizations on the front end, and also everything across the legacy amendment does get reported in terms of how it was spent afterwards on the Legislative Coordinating Commission's website. So there are some details about spending there that are separate from the review and approval processes. And also keep in mind that portions of how those funds are distributed by us in particular are defined in statute. So there are some things that disagree a little bit between the statute and the legacy plan. But we are, of course, bound by the bits that are in statute until the legislature changes that, which covers some of these concerns, but not all of them. That was the only one of those I got this time. So with that, that will move us on to our business items. We have three. The first one of which is acceptance of the public comment report and adoption of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan Amendment. We have a presentation by Tracy and Emmett on this. Go ahead.
Good. I'll wait till the PowerPoint comes up, but good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your flexibility while we deal with some of the challenges of having your, I guess, computer central. I think that there was a little fire in there today, so we lost our streaming ability, but thanks for the flexibility. Tracy and I are here today to bring you a recommendation to adopt the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan Amendment. Next slide, please. Here's our agenda for today. We'll start by telling briefly our learnings on the public comment period, including our pilot efforts, something that we discussed with you at our last meeting. Next, we're going to review the high-level recommendation in the policy plan amendment. We'll talk about what's changed. And then finally, we will request your recommendation to move this item forward. Next slide, please. Here's our well-worn public comment timeline. We've moved through these stages where we invited participation, engaged stakeholders, refined the draft plan, and here we are at the approval process today, requesting your recommendation to move the final policy plan amendment forward. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, we wanted to just touch on this because it was such a central part of this effort, but the public comment process and the lessons learned. I want to just start by thanking you again for your advice and encouragement to try some new engagement approaches with this process. This was critical, and we really learned a lot during this effort. As we stated last time, we had three sort of high-level learnings, and I know that a lot of you folks knew these going in. But traditional engagement approaches works really well with dominant culture audiences. Namely, our survey did a great job reaching, our traditional audiences. Reaching new audiences takes time, especially working with historically underserved groups. And finally, if the relationship with the audience is only cultivated or built during the time when we need something, that relationship isn't going to be successful. So how do you draw out a long-term, mutually beneficial relationship? So those were some of our big learnings from this process. Next slide, please. And here we are at the policy plan amendment, the significant changes. I'm going to walk through the 26 system additions or expansions, and then Tracy will cover a few other policy plan changes. As you can see with this slide, there's 26 system additions. There were 4 boundary adjustments. There were 5 search areas, and there are 17 regional trail search corridors. Next slide, please. As you probably remember from the public comment review, we did receive tremendous support for these additions, along with some concerns regarding their cost and our ability to maintain the existing system. So I'm going to start with the boundary adjustments. Here are the 4 boundary adjustments. With each of these areas, I'm going to highlight just one of the system additions with each agency. So with Ramsey County, there was just one boundary adjustment, Battle Creek Regional Park boundary adjustment. But I wanted to just call out the Fish Creek unit, which was actually added to the southern portion of Battle Creek. It's a City of Maplewood current property, and it is a stunning, high-quality natural area that will really add to this park experience, as well as strengthen our commitment to that Mississippi Flyway. Just a great addition. Three River Park District had 2 boundary adjustments. The one I wanted to feature today was the Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature boundary adjustment. When Three Rivers talks about this, they say, if you look at a map of Gale Woods Farm, it looks like there's a big tooth missing. Well, here's the tooth. The system addition they're doing here, it's a very logical one, and they're going to come in the ensuing months with an acquisition request for this one. So really excited about that one. And then Washington County. This is Pine Point Regional Park boundary adjustment. We just saw the master plan for this, and there was a big portion of that master plan that the boundary adjustment is contingent on our passage of this policy plan amendment. And right after this business item, we're going to see Jessica with a park acquisition opportunity request with an acquisition that's contingent on the passage of this plan, as I said. Next slide, please. And here are the 5 new search areas. Anoka County has 2 proposed. Both are existing facilities in their system. They're county level facilities. I'm really excited about this Rum River complex for the same reasons that Jeremy is. I'm looking forward to digging into the question around whether or not we should create a water trail park classification. And this is something that we'll be discussing with you in the coming year. Three Rivers Park District had 3 of these search areas. And the one I wanted to feature today was that last bullet point, the first ring special recreation feature, which is a bridging facility. And this idea was created way back in 2014, and we are seeing our first bridging facility proposal. So I'm really, again, excited about that one. Next slide, please. And here are the 17 regional trail search corridors. So I'm going to begin with Carver County's County Road 11 Regional Trail Search Corridor. This is a really great north-south regional trail proposal that will connect western portions of Chaska and Carver with the Minnesota River Valley and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and DNR management lands. So it's a great nature-based destination. I think it's going to be a great trail. The second one on this slide is the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Midtown Greenway. While all of you know the Midtown Greenway exists, this is bringing it officially into the regional park system under the management of the Park Board. And as you know, this is the superhighway of regional trails. This is it connects multiple regional parks and trails and really provides great east-west connection. Next slide, please. St. Paul has 3 regional trail search corridors. I wanted to call out, just because I was on the topic of the Midtown Greenway, is the Midtown Greenway extension, which actually there's a CP rail bridge that crosses the Mississippi River. Will that ever be a trail? I don't know, but it certainly would be exciting if we could secure it. But this would continue the Midtown Greenway across the Mississippi River and into the city of St. Paul's system. And then 2 other rail trail proposals in St. Paul, which again are all destination quality exciting. Scott County has 2 regional trail search corridors, and I do want to call them both out just because the Cedar Lake Farm to New Prague was the trail where we received the most public comment support of anything that we got. I just wanted to call that out. And then the Lake Marion to Scott West Regional Trail Search Corridor. This is just that super exciting trail that scored very highly in every category that we had. And it is the one, Cecily, that you said, 3 to 6 miles, what's that? And Patty said back, well, we're exploring the idea of meandering it through Murphy-Hanrahan Park Reserve. So super excited about that. That's one portion of it. Next slide, please. And here is Three Rivers Park District. They have 6 regional trail search corridors proposed. And the one I wanted to call out was Weaver Lake Regional Trail Search Corridor. This is a really exciting east-west trail proposal that will span the northern part of Hennepin County, going from Brooklyn Park and the Mississippi River Regional Trail all the way to the other side of the county and Lake Rebecca Park Reserve and the Crow River Regional Trail. So it's going to be great. Next slide, please. This is my last slide, so thank you for your patience. Finally, here are Washington County's 4 regional trail search corridors. And the one I wanted to just call out because it was mentioned in that St. Paul one was the Lake Elmo Park Reserve to Phelan Keller Regional Park. It's an exciting Washington County partnership and Ramsey County. And I think it's potentially going to be along a rail line. I know there's a lot of details to work out, but again, I think just a superb slate of system additions. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Tracy to bring us home and talk about the other policy refinements. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmett. Next slide, please. Can you hear me? To our
Yes.
commissioners.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Awesome. Chair, Commissioners, Councilmember, good afternoon. How are you? Good to see you. I'm happy to bring to you today the general or the major policy refinements in the amendment. There are a few of them, and during the next few slides, I will do a high-level overview of the changes in the policy plan. So attachment 1 in your business item is a list of changes. And attachment 2 is the strike-through version of the draft amendment. And then attachment 3 is the clean copy of the amendment. And now let's focus on the policy refinements. So boundary adjustments. New policy was added that describes minor boundary adjustment criteria and the process to have one. On occasion, parcels of land become available to include in a new park or trail master plan. Minor boundary adjustments may be considered with a concurrent master plan or acquisition master plan amendment. Significant boundary adjustments will still be considered through the systems additions process, similar to the ones that we went through. Bridging facilities. Staff worked with the agencies on adding more description and criteria to the bridging facilities during the systems additions process. Bridging facilities are a type of special recreation feature that are intended to attract and introduce new outdoor recreation users to the regional park and trails. They are designed to prototype new ideas that advance equitable usage, focusing on underserved groups in the regional park system. We are excited to have that new bridging facility search area in the regional park system, as Emmett mentioned, and we look forward to more in the coming years. Next slide, please. Now on to park and trail master plan requirements. There are some policy refinements for park and trail master plan boundaries. Master plan boundaries for regional parks and trails must include both an administrative and a management boundary. And these would also include known and potential inholdings. Including both of the boundaries is important to accurately understand the size of the regional park or trail and the overall regional park system, as well as calculating funding and protecting the land through the comprehensive plan process. Next on to the equity analysis requirement. The equity analysis requirement for master plans was approved by the Council in February 2020. We're so excited it was approved. It is designed to ensure that questions of who benefits and who is affected by the development of the regional park or trail will be addressed in the master plan. The requirement centers equity in the master planning process. Next slide, please. And now onto the cost estimate to complete the system and the Chapter 9 work plan items. So for the estimated cost to complete the system, state law requires that the policy plan to estimate the cost of recommended acquisitions and development of the park system. This estimate was comprehensively updated in 2018 during the last major update of the policy plan. The estimated build out of the entire system is roughly $2.1 billion. This is also the same amount that it was in 2018. During the public comment period, we received new 2020 data that reflected acquisition land values that actually brought down the land prices. So previously, before the public comment period, it was 2.3 billion, and then it went down to 2.1 billion to reflect this 2020 data, which is nice. And then finally, on to the work plan for the Regional Parks Policy Plan. The work plan was updated to add new studies, and we're really excited to see how this evolves during the next 4 years as it leads up to the 2020, 2024, also the 2050 systems update. So we're excited about that. A few highlights include the cultural historical study and the water trail study that Emmett just mentioned. The cultural historical study will seek to describe historical inequities in the regional park system that result in barriers to use. Included in this study, and new since the public comment period, is the inclusion in the land acknowledgement study. The inclusion of the land acknowledgement study was added to the historical cultural study because it made sense, because we're going to be having a regional convening and conversation about this with agency partners and community priority community organizations. And then the water trail study. We will be exploring a subclassification or a new classification to provide paddling opportunities, camping, and more. And we're excited to pursue both of them and all the other work tasks in the work plan in Chapter 9. So this wraps up the major policy refinements in the amendment. So next slide, please. So the upcoming dates before you are here. We're in the December 3rd Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Committee. This will then go to Monday's December 7th Community Development Committee, then on to a presentation to the full council on December 23rd. Next slide, please. And with this, I'd like to ask for your recommended action that the Metropolitan Council accept the public comment summary report on the draft amendment to the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan and adopt the revised final 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan amendment. Next slide, please. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. What questions do commissioners have on that?
Hi, Tracy. This is Anthony. This looks really good. I'm actually, and I don't know, I made a note to myself to ask if, the work that, and maybe make, have we already done the work to redefine or expand the definition around the bridging facility work? So that actually is in the 2040 plan? That's in there, right? Okay.
Chair Commissioners, correct. That is in this new amendment.
All right. Thank you.
I think we may also have a note in there that we probably expect to have further refinements to that over time as we get some more experience with them. But there are updates in this draft compared to current language.
Yeah, and I think, and you guys have done really good work on that, and I think that I think one of the things I'm feeling like too, and as I listen to us talk about it, and I think it'd be interesting. I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but the way that I think there's a way that we are talking about it, and I guess for myself, one of the things I've borrowed from our conversations in other work I'm doing is to begin to think about, or to specifically talk about things as progressive nature-based experiences. And I'm just saying that I think that one of the things that, and I'm using progressive to say, one, that there's an experience around an opportunity to have a progression around an experience, you know what I mean, where it is developmental for the participant, but also progressive in terms of how it is connected to other elements of the regional park system. And I think that, again, I think that, that's what I'm thinking in terms of our work. And I think when I'm listening to you talk and listening to Emmett talk, I hear that particular phrasing that we're beginning to use around nature-based, and progression, again, is really critical. But I worry that, we've kind of laid the hammer so strong on equity that they, you know what I mean, that it's almost like the definition becomes that it specifically is attracting underrepresented community. Like I'm just worried that that language is kind of, and not that it shouldn't be in there, but that is, again, I would, pose, as I say that out loud to everyone, I mean, does that resonate for you all? And again, even for Tracy and Emmett, that, you're in the center of the work. And is that a further description of what we mean and how it will serve us long-term in terms of actually creating those experiences where people engage the park and grow into the system? and that they then experience the regional park. Again, that's the ultimate goal, is where we invite someone, introduce someone, they have an experience, and then what they then do is become adventurers in our own system. You know what I mean? That to me is the ultimate win. So again, I say that out loud for the first time in these meetings, and so I don't know, how does that resonate with other commissioners, and does that add context to what we're talking about as we work with the implementing agencies as well?
Chair, Commissioner Taylor, that language really resonates with me, and I really liked the way you said it, the idea that we continue to refine the definition going forward as nature-based opportunities, and that it be sort of progressive nature-based opportunities. And I do like the two dimensions that you laid out. I'm thinking about one of the Three Rivers Park District's, their only proposal for legacy projects this year is at their Mississippi Gateway Regional Trail or Regional Park, and that is a total makeover of the former Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park, and that the concept, as you were talking about it, is basically the concept that I've seen embedded in that plan, which is bringing people in, particularly new audiences, and then slowly moving them out further into the park until ultimately there's even opportunities to wade in the Mississippi River. Not December, but so I like that language a lot. And then I also like the broader notion that we are trying to move people in to an entry level experience, but then move them out into our system, which is, across the region, north to south, east to west, we have an amazing system. So thanks. I like it.
Tony, this is Bob Mueller.
Yes, Bob.
I really like, I'm sorry, Tony Russo, I would address Anthony Taylor. I really like the concept of nature-based. I think it adds another way of describing what we're doing. And I think the progression thing is really a nice way of talking about, we start by giving an awareness and a toe in the water, and hopefully that will lead them to discover and want to taste more of it. So on both counts, I like your input.
Thanks, Bob. One of the other things I also am trying to also do is we have to also, I think that we've struggled on this idea of programming. And I think that one of the things that it also puts pressure on is the measurement of programming that is progressive. You know what I mean? The real estate itself is not progressive. It's the programming and the design. And those are the elements within the particular thing that really we can. And I think that's also something that I'm, again, aware of, is that we're not, the pressure on the programmatic element of it is that they go hand in hand. And so again, that's just another, I'm saying a test I am giving myself as I'm developing stuff, or doing programming or inviting community to participate in something new, is that measurement of, is their experience progression, right? Is it progressive in terms of how they engage? And is there a handoff almost? Like the progression doesn't end with the experience, it actually ends with, is there an actual intentional handoff in terms of the opportunity? And I think that if we're not intentional about it, then it won't necessarily happen. And that can be any point of entry. It can be hiking or however we're describing those bridging facilities. I think, again, so anyway, that's how I've been thinking about it as well.
Sure. Thank you, Anthony. So yeah, making sure that we have an invitation and suggestion to go on to the next thing whenever we do have someone in, and keeping track of not only who we're attracting, but what we're attracting them to is parts of what I'm hearing from that. And I heard it sounded like Tracy had something to add as well. Go ahead. Lynette.
Sorry, I'm on my phone today. That's not as useful. Do you mind, sir, if I
Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. There were two things that came to mind. One, related to Anthony's comments. One thing I wonder about, Anthony, and I appreciate you saying you're sharing this, thinking this stuff out loud. Could I love, and Anthony knows this, Tony knows this probably, and as well. For me, progression is the key for everything when it comes to increasing participation in the outdoors for everyone. And the entry activity, though, I think is where we have the most disparity in perception of what is entry activities to nature-based activities later on, and what is nature-based. So things I wonder about are, for example, in my career in outdoor guiding as an interpretive specialist in the work that Anthony and I do now, the entry is often, for example, a meal at a park. No activities necessarily that first time at all. Or it's relationship building, maybe even prior to going to a regional park or another facility. And so I just think that that's something that is often missed when agencies and organizations want to diversify or engage new public in the outdoors or anything for that matter, is that the initiation doesn't start with the activity, especially for groups that have been in a situation where they don't feel welcomed or comfortable in certain spaces. So I just wonder if that's something to identify, is what does that progression actually look like when it is inclusive to the most broadest population possible. Think about people with physical disabilities or all kinds of things. You know, that first step in that progression or scaffolding has to be something that is welcoming and inclusive and safe for them. It might be a basketball court at Cedarworth Beach. It might be a dinner at a local community center that leads to some activities that leads to visiting the local regional park, for example. The other thing I wonder about is, or I don't wonder about, but I got a contact from a constituent this week I just wanted to share, was around our equity work being really focused on engagement. I know we got some comments related to that. I think that that's something I just wanted to share again, that we really need to make sure when we're talking about equity, we are going broader than just engagement and listening. And I think that Anthony's point really speaks to how do we start moving the conversation from engagement and planning to actual programming and changing the way we are doing business. So thanks for that. And I hope, Anthony, if what I was saying was not on track, please offer correction.
No, I think you're right on, and I think, and again, you're a gentle reminder for me all the time. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and I think in some ways it actually is again it speaks to the point of even our engagement work, right? That it starts before that it's a long-term relationship, and I think that point of entry, and again for us, these are the kind of things when we get down to bridging facilities, and that's why actually I included the invitation. Right. It doesn't start. There's something that is important for all of our implementing agencies to understand about that as well. And so I think that that's really an important point because, and I actually know all the time, I have to remind people of the first day that they learned to ride a bike. Like nobody who rides a bike remembers that. So they always start from where they are rather than those memories. And so I think that that's really important in terms of the engagement. And the other thing that you reminded me of that I made a note about relative to, kind of equity and the idea is that that equity, that engagement is not equity in itself. And I think that really is important. I even made a note to say, are we putting pressure on implementing agencies to diversify their boards, to diversify, when we talk of redistribution of power, that's what equity is, right? I mean, and that's a challenge for us. And is this an opportunity for us to push a little bit on the implementing agencies and anybody that we work with around the redistribution of the decision makers? And again, Tracy, this is where the work around engaging community in an ongoing way happens, is that community is involved with decision making, with fiscal decision making power. Like, is there a way that we are pushing on that too? Or is this our opportunity to invite community to be a part of how we choose how the equity grant is given out or something? But I think there is an element for us around our ongoing relationship with people who live in the community related to the decisions that are made and the way that things happen. So I think that is Linnea is absolutely right.
All right, thank you, Anthony. We have other kind of questions or follow-up on that piece. We can also take motions and do further discussion within that context. Whatever's more comfortable.
I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I figured as much. So, I mean.
Anthony, I think we're hearing part of a phone conversation. Right. Anyone else? We do also, where there's several documents posted on this, if you refer to the very top one that's just labeled as 2020-326, you will see a proposed action if you want to use that to inform a motion potentially.
Or Greg, could you put up the second to last slide of that last PowerPoint? Sorry to ask you to do that, but thank you.
That would work too.
Tony, I have a point of order to go along with this. I know we had discussed during our previous meetings more recently about the balance between something that's appropriate for the policy plan and something that's appropriate perhaps for the legislature to take up to revise some of the purposes for parks and open space to target a few of these pieces. And I wonder if there's language that we should be including to encourage the council to do whatever they do for that. I'm just ignorant, so I'm trying to request advice on that.
Yeah, we have sometimes included some language along those lines a little bit in, I don't know exactly what section, but I think there is something that guides council staff on some things. We haven't specifically done guidance on lobbying to the legislature in that before, to my knowledge, but there is some stuff about that. Perhaps Emmett could also speak to whether that is where they would prefer such things go. We can also do resolutions outside of the policy plan if we want, and depending on what we're asking, that may be the more appropriate place too. But I'll let Emmett speak to that a little more.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, thank you, Jeremy, for that idea. I'd need to better understand what exactly we wanted to do, but certainly I think outside, like a resolution of support or a resolution of intent and then spelling out what we want would probably be more effective. That legislative process is a much longer term undertaking, not that we're not all in it for the long term, but I guess I would love to talk to you more offline about what we want to accomplish here, and then I could probably give you better advice.
Okay, thanks. I was just speaking more to my previous discomfort with the difference on the difference of opinion we had about the spectrum of recreational development of open space,
Right.
and getting some legislative clarity on that language. But it sounds like this might not be the appropriate place for that, and we can connect on where that is appropriate. So I would offer the recommended action here as a motion.
And
Okay.
this, Bob Mueller, I would second that.
Okay. We have a motion from Jeremy and a second from Bob. That motion is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, accept the public comment summary report on the draft amendment to the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, and 2, adopt the revised final 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan amendment. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing no discussion, we will proceed to a vote on that motion as presented. Sandy Dingle will call the roll.
Thank you, Tony. Lolita Davis Carter,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Kemery,
Aye.
Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Jeremy votes aye.
Nate Rich,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor,
Anthony says aye.
Thank you. Rick Tyson.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Okay, that carries. That is approved. Thank you. That will move us along to our second business item, which is the Pine Point Regional Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program acquisition. And for this, we have a presentation by Jessica Lee. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. This is Jessica Lee, Parks Planner and Program Manager, presenting business item 2020-327 Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for Pine Point Regional Park, the Branson property in Washington County. Next slide, please. Pine Point Regional Park is located in the northern central portion of Washington County, just north of Stillwater and a few miles southwest of Square Lake Special Recreation Feature. Next slide, please. Pine Point became a regional park in 2005. The 287-acre park has a variety of natural features, including pine forest, deciduous forest, mesic prairie, oak savanna, marshes, and 2 lakes. In addition to 5 miles of multi-use trails within the park, Pine Point also serves as a major trailhead for the Gateway State Trail, an 18-mile trail that begins in St. Paul. Next slide, please. Here's a map of Pine Point with the 48-acre Branson property circled in blue on the east side of the park boundary. The Branson property was being used primarily for agriculture, has no structures, and contains over 14 acres of undeveloped open meadow and oak savanna. The Parks Policy Plan amendment includes a boundary adjustment requested by Washington County. The current park boundary is shown here in red. When approved, the amendment will expand the boundary of Pine Point to include the shaded areas outside of the red border, including the Branson parcel. Next slide, please. The Branson property was appraised at $776,000, and the seller has agreed to that amount. The total cost, including stewardship and legal fees, is $787,000, and the grant amount is $590,000. Washington County will provide the required 25% local match. And you may have noticed in the business item that this grant will be funded with all legacy funds. The last POF we brought forward was funded with all council funds. Because we received legacy funds in monthly installments from the state and hadn't received enough yet at that point. However, we will ensure that the 3-to-2 legacy to council bonds ratio is met at the program level for the fiscal year, and the next POFs we bring forward will reflect that. Next slide, please. Our rationale for recommendation is that this project is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the state fiscal year 2021 Parks and Trails Legacy Fund appropriation requirements, the Pine Point Regional Park Master Plan, and Washington County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for Parks and Trails Legacy Fund park acquisition funding. Next slide, please. The recommended action is that the Metropolitan Council approves a grant of up to $590,805 to Washington County for the 48.52-acre Branson property located at 120th Street North in Stillwater Township for Pine Point Regional Park, contingent on council approval of the amendment to the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, business item 2020-326. Accept the public comment report and adopt the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan amendment, and authorizes the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. And with that, I am happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay. What questions do you have on this item?
This is Jeremy. Jessica, I have a question for you about that funding exception. I don't recall ever seeing that before. Is that typical to see where, because of holdback or some other reason, funds don't come in a timely way and we distribute the ratio across multiple projects?
Thank you for the question, Chair and members. That's not typical. This year, we were more cautious because of the pandemic. We weren't sure if the legacy funds would be reduced. So this year we decided to approach it slightly differently.
Thank you, Jessica. And to elaborate a little on that, remember the legacy funds are ultimately coming from a sales tax. So the concern there is if people are making less money because they're losing their jobs because of the pandemic, then they're also buying less things and then less sales taxes coming in. So while normally those legacy funds come in at a fairly steady pace, we didn't know whether they would this year, and so had to kind of hold off on some bits just because we didn't want to spend money that we weren't guaranteed. In the past, the council has often been willing to spend money it did not yet actually have and just say, we assume we're going to get some money from the state in September for this, so we'll just go for it and take that risk because it's a relatively low risk normally. Because there was more economic uncertainty, it was a higher risk for the same action. So the council chose to instead only spend council money that it knew it had rather than potentially obligating itself to a debt that wouldn't have a way to pay it well, if that makes sense.
That does. Shifting to a wiser business practice, I understand.
I will ask Jessica, assuming you're the one who gets it next time, otherwise any other staff member, we may need to see on whatever business item gets us to our all caught up to back to normal range, having the numbers from these previous ones as well, showing that we have in fact done so that we know when we're back to our regular proportions.
Yep, I'd be happy to do that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Or if anyone cares to move anything.
Hi, this is Cecily. I enthusiastically move the recommended action.
Okay, thank you, Cecily. We have a motion for the recommended action. Do we have a second for that?
Second, Rick Tyson.
We have a second from Rick. Thank you, Rick. So our motion on the table is that the Metropolitan Council approves a grant of up to $590,805 to Washington County for the 48.52-acre Branson property located at 120th Street North in Stillwater Township for Pine Point Regional Park, contingent on council approval of the amendment to the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the business item that we just saw, accept the regional park, accept the public comment report and adopt the Regional Park Policy Plan amendment, and authorizes the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm really excited about this acquisition because, you know, it supports an expansion of the master plan boundary, as well as the search corridor that's in the regional plan, and the search corridor for the Gateway Trail. So I think this acquisition serves a lot of purposes for Pine Point Regional Park.
Thank you, Cecily. To provide some context for those who may not know, eventually the Gateway Trail is supposed to extend and go on to Taylor's Falls and beyond before coming back into Hinckley. We don't know details of what that'll look like yet, but this could be related. And also in the master plan we saw a few months ago, they're looking to redo and expand the trail system within the regional park, and this would be part of that to provide some better separation between bicycles and horses and hikers and skiers, and have a little bit more variety in the trails. Any other discussion?
Hey, this is Anthony. So, Jessica, this is, I don't know, somewhat related, but I wanted to know, is, the trail that runs from the Gateway down Norrell back towards Browns Creek, is that a Washington County maintained trail? I mean, you know what I mean? Is it Washington County? It's different than the rest of the stuff there, that's all.
I don't know if Jessica had that prepared, but I can tell you that yes, that is a county trail along a county highway that has not been designated as regional.
It's not, right? That's what I wanted to know. Okay. Is that, I mean, is that it's good like it is, or is that something you think they'll absorb? Anthony, see, look at Anthony, the trail savant. Thank you. Is there a sense that they would do that? Because one of the things that's nice about that is how it makes a loop, for people as they're on that system. And the Browns Creek Trail system is so used by people. So I was wondering.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that part of one of the proposed search corridors?
It is at least near a search corridor. There is the Central Greenway where they have actual master plan up through a little ways north of Lake Elmo so far, and they have not yet done the master planning of this segment. So it's close enough to that fuzzy line that could end up being considered as one potential route for that corridor, but it's certainly not guaranteed. Yes, as the Washington County Central Greenway is the name you're looking for on that one.
Thank you, Tony.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we'll move ahead to a vote on that motion as presented. Roll call by Sandy.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with Lolita Davis Carter.
I vote aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Todd Kemry.
Aye.
Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Jeremy votes aye.
Nate Rich.
Aye.
Anthony Taylor.
Aye.
Rick Tyson.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it.
Thank you. So that is approved. That will bring us on to our last business item, which is a Sam Morgan Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment for St. Paul, a presentation by Colin Kelly. Go ahead, Colin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council Member, Commissioners, and agency partners. I am Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst, and I am here to present the Samuel H. Morgan Regional Trail Corridor Master Plan Amendment on behalf of the City of St. Paul. Speaking of St. Paul, I would like to mention that Alice Messer, Bianca Paz, Brett Hussong, and Paul Sawyer are all here today joining us and may join the discussion at the conclusion of this presentation. Council staff appreciate their work on the master plan amendment and their presence at this meeting today. Next slide, please. The Samuel Morgan Regional Trail is located near the center of the regional park system in the city of St. Paul. These are figures 1 and 2 in the staff report. The 5.9-mile trail provides a continuous bicycle and pedestrian connection between Crosby Farm Regional Park to the west and Battle Creek Regional Park to the east, almost all of it along the mighty Mississippi River. The trail connects natural landscapes with urban settings and travels through and near spaces that are significant to the history and spirituality of the Dakota people. Next slide, please. The current plan amendment is the result of a planning process performed largely in 2018 to renovate the 21.4 acres of regional trail corridor land that is Lower Landing. This is figure 3 in the staff report. This segment of the trail is only about 0.6 of a mile long, but is much wider than a typical regional trail corridor in the middle, presenting an opportunity to provide secondary recreational uses that complement the primary trail use. Since the plan amendment proposes such uses, it addresses the requirements of Chapter 7 in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. The City of St. Paul has also provided a memo that includes more information on these secondary recreational uses, which is included in the staff report as Attachment 1. The secondary recreational opportunities are intended to strengthen equitable use of the trail corridor by all residents of the region and the local area. More on this topic in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Community and partner engagement was critical in developing recommendations for the regional trail corridor, and many different organizations, groups, and individuals were involved. They included residents of Dayton's Bluff and downtown neighborhoods, a design advisory committee made up of city residents and trail users, the city's Capitol River Council, which is one of 17 district councils for the city, the Lower Phelan Creek Project, a native-led East Side environmental conservation nonprofit, the Capitol River Watershed District, Ramsey County, Tribal Historic Preservation Offices, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, the Mississippi Park Connection, and the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. The city followed a community engagement strategy during the planning process, which helped to ensure that both current and future trail corridor users were involved in the development of the plan's recommendations. Next slide, please. Through a variety of engagement opportunities, participants noted that new activities and enhanced safety measures would encourage more use of the regional trail corridor. Community members also suggested adding natural surface trails and sitting areas to appreciate river views and nature. In addition, the design team and Lower Phelan Creek Project discussed using the eastern portion of the regional trail corridor as a natural transition space to the sacred Wakan Teepee site, an Indian Mounds burial site. This part of the trail corridor would be designed to acknowledge the significance of the area to the Dakota people through the use of signage, public art, and interpretation. The design team and Lower Phelan Creek Project also discussed including environmental education opportunities near where the existing stormwater sewer discharges water from Lower Phelan Creek into the Mississippi River. Prior to the development of transportation and freight corridors in the area, the original natural flow of the creek would end at the Mississippi River at Lower Landing. Next slide, please. As a brief reminder, the equity analysis requirement for master planning is an examination of the public engagement process and outcomes for stakeholders by race, ethnicity, national origin, income, ability, age, and other pertinent characteristics. The equity analysis is intended to include 3 main parts: project data, public engagement and participation, and the evaluation summary. This slide summarizes the first 2 components, and the next slide summarizes the third. Project data is meant to get at scope and context, including the demographics of the public engagement area and what is known about underserved populations in that space. The graphic on the right is figure 6 in the staff report, and it highlights some of the demographic characteristics of 4 neighborhoods near the regional trail corridor. One of the findings is that there are many households with children in Upper East downtown, and many of these residents are of East African background. Also, adjacent neighborhoods are primarily made up of low-income families with low mobility and limited recreation options. Through the public engagement process, city staff learned that many residents have not used the regional trail or lower landing due to lack of awareness or due to safety concerns. They also learned that there is demand for active recreation opportunities to serve youth. Further, because of the close connection to the Metro Green Line at Union Depot, improving lower landing would serve residents who don't have close-to-home access to the river. Next slide, please. The third component of the equity analysis is the evaluation summary and is meant to articulate how public participation efforts impact the recommendations made, often related to the master plan's development concept and how the planning effort will create better outcomes. Participants felt that the regional trail corridor and lower landing should be more accessible and inclusive. Also, the communities who would benefit from improvements and investment in this space are culturally diverse. I should point out that the figure on the right is figure 7 in the staff report. I appreciated the exchange, cooperation, celebration, or ECC framework that is highlighted on the right side. As the plan amendment notes, quote, activities framed in this context that promote exchanges, cooperation, and that allow for celebration or commemoration are more likely to help break down social barriers and make people feel comfortable and safe sharing public spaces. Prior to plan implementation, the design team is committed to reaching out to all who participated in the planning process to follow up and adapt proposals, if needed. Overall, the master plan aims to strengthen equitable use of the regional trail and surrounding regional trail corridor land by all communities nearby and within the region. Next slide, please. Any new facilities in Lower Landing and the Regional Trail Corridor will be developed in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Based on the results of community input and the assessment of site conditions, opportunities, and constraints, 3 main goals were identified to guide site organization and programming. Number 1, integrate the regional trail with the adjacent context, spatially and socially, to improve and provide connections to the adjacent and age-diverse communities. Number 2, activate the regional trail corridor through the addition of trail-oriented activities while respecting and keeping the existing tranquil natural settings along the river corridor. Number 3, reveal the inherent history of the area by taking advantage of the location of the trail alignment, and its connection to relevant historic sites and the river. The graphics on the right are figures 4 and 5 in the staff report. Next slide, please. 4 projects were identified as priorities to start activating Lower Landing to make it more welcoming and accessible. They include access and park entryway plaza improvement, parking lot expansion, the addition of a natural surface trail, and an off-leash dog area. These projects were all identified as either high or medium-high priorities in the master plan amendment. Other high-priority projects include resurfacing the existing regional trail and replacing the lighting along the trail, which have both been in place since 1992. Other medium-high priority projects include improving and providing open multi-use lawns, providing additional drinking fountains along the trail, restoring wetlands, rehabilitating or replacing the riprap along the river's edge, and adding signage and interpretive artistic features to nodes along the trail. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the plan amendment proposes some non-traditional recreational activities, and I use quotations on this slide on non-traditional, as one of them is, in fact, quite traditional. But we'll get to that in a minute. Among other activities, the plan amendment proposes adding pickup game space for futsal and half basketball courts, a pump track or bike skills course, and the improvement of open multi-purpose lawns for community events, native lacrosse games, and other uses. Pickup game courts would fulfill the need for active recreational amenities recommended through community engagement activities. Futsal, a fast-moving version of soccer on a smaller pitch, and basketball are 2 of the most popular activities that agency staff see young people playing in parks without adequate facilities for those activities. These activities are inclusive social games for all genders, races, ages, and abilities. Rain gardens and bioswales would be added to collect stormwater from the courts. The plan amendment also recommends developing a pump track or bike skills course in the regional trail corridor, which could be integrated into the existing landscape with relative close access to the existing regional trail. To Commissioner Taylor's point earlier, this is an opportunity for progressive nature-based experience that begins or continues in the urban context and can progress in many directions. Of course, in this space, floodplain design requirements would also be taken into consideration. In addition, the plan amendment recommends open multi-purpose lawns for a variety of activities, including to support community events and an interpretive or educational area to learn about and play native lacrosse. Implementing a native lacrosse field was suggested by members of the Native American community who live in the Dayton's Bluff neighborhood. Using the space in this way would provide an opportunity to share the significance of the game and its cultural connection with the indigenous community. I should note, again, that because the plan amendment proposes new or non-traditional uses, it addresses the requirements of Chapter 7 in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. More detailed information on these activities is available in Attachment 1 in the staff report. By activating the regional trail corridor with these and other proposed recreational activities, agency staff believe the space will feel safer. Further, these recreational activities are directly linked to the community engagement efforts and the equity analysis. Next slide, please. I mentioned the proximity to the Metro Green Line LRT earlier, but it's definitely worth mentioning again. Lower Landing is really the only area in the Samuel Morgan Regional Trail Corridor that has such close access to the LRT. It is only about a 5-minute walk or so from Union Depot. There are a number of Metro Transit routes that serve the area as well, including the 3, 16, 21, 54, 63, 64, 70, 74, 94, 480, and 484. Next slide, please. Since all of the land within the trail corridor is already in public ownership, there are no acquisition costs anticipated, and no land acquisition is necessary. Development cost estimates, which total approximately $9,260,000, include resurfacing the trail, replacing lighting along the trail, adding wayfinding signage, adding interpretive resting nodes, improving multi-use lawns, adding a pump track, adding half basketball and futsal courts, planting trees and prairie species, and restoring wetlands. I should note, as always, that approval of this master plan amendment does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Samuel Morgan Regional Trail Corridor Master Plan Amendment is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, including Planning Strategy 1, Recreation Activities and Facilities Strategy 1 through 3, and other council policies such as those found in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you, then, is that the Metropolitan Council approve the City of St. Paul's Samuel Morgan Regional Trail Corridor Master Plan Amendment, including the supplemental information provided in the memo dated October 26, 2020, and require the City of St. Paul, prior to initiating any new development of the Regional Trail Corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division. And with that, I stand for any questions or comments you may have, and will remind you that the City of St. Paul staff is on the line as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin. Questions or motions? What do we have?
Tony, this is Linnea. Can I share one quick thing?
You can try to speak up as much as you can, because I know some people are having trouble hearing you with the phone.
Oh, really? You know what? I'm gonna change my.
That is better.
Is this better?
Whatever you had just done.
Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to share that the traditional name for the game is the Creator's Game. So I think it'd be great if we could use that language instead of Native Lacrosse, because the original name for the game is the Creator's Game. That was my little point to share. I think it's a great project.
Okay, thank you, Linnea. You don't happen to know what that is actually in the native language, do you?
That's what it translates to. But it's known as the creator's game, but different native communities used their language to say the same thing. Does that make sense? Did what I just say make sense?
Yeah, because the game was played across more than just one group,
Exactly.
and so more language. Got it. Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Mr. Chair and Colin, I think this is really exciting. This kind of feels like we've turned a corner and we're beginning to move from talking about inclusion of more of a variety of things to attract people to actual implementation. And I'm very excited about it and certainly support it.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Well, I'm excited about this project too, and just wanted to share. My ancestors settled in Dayton's Bluff in the 1850s and built a brewery there. And there's a lot of family stories of my great-great-grandmother serving meals to the native peoples who lived in that area. But that said, I'm very excited about what's referenced here as these non-traditional sports. And I'm not familiar with the term creators game, but I can tell you in California, lacrosse is one of the fastest growing team sports. I live near a high school, and a lot of us love to go watch the girls play because it's a very fun game to watch. It's very fast moving, lots of running, and you don't need a lot of gear and supplies. So I'm kind of curious, do any of the local high schools in St. Paul have lacrosse teams or leagues? Because it'd be great to get that started if it isn't already there. I
believe Roseville does.
Roseville does? Okay, great. I'm also a real big fan of having native surface trails in this area as it's near the river. And again, historically, I'm sure there were a lot of sort of transportation corridors of the various native peoples that live there. So it's bringing, some history back to the area, or prehistory even. So anyhow, great.
Okay, thank you, Cecily. Anyone else? Questions or motion?
Actually, I would like to commend St. Paul. This the St. Paul team is just doing an amazing job in general, and this project reflects that. This is kind of there's so many great things planned for next year in terms of the way that they're connecting the trail system. They open, and if you haven't done it, anybody go ride 8 Mill. That is open this fall. They've opened up 4 great additions to the system related to kind of the biking and the transportation system there. So St. Paul's doing an amazing job, and I'm really proud of the work that they keep bringing forward. So I would like to bring a motion to accept the proposed action.
This is Lolita, second it.
Tony, you're muted.
All right. So yes, we have a motion and a second. That motion is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, approve the City of St. Paul's Samuel Morgan Regional Trail Corridor Master Plan Amendment, including the supplemental information provided in the submittal memorandum dated October 26, 2020, and 2, require the City of St. Paul, prior to initiating any new development of the Regional Trail Corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division. What discussion do we have on that motion? I guess if no one else is jumping in, I'll say some of the items in this proposal are some examples of things where how they fit into a nature-based system kind of depends on the details of how they're implemented. In particular, I'm looking at this bicycle pump track idea, and that could go a couple of different ways. And I'm really hoping that when they get into the detailed engineering, that you can find a way to kind of build that into the landscape more than simply plopping it onto the landscape. So if it can be, it's not exactly a completely through the woods winding mountain bike trail like you might see in some other places, but you can also do something sort of halfway in between where it kind of goes into the bluff a little bit and isn't just we put some piles of dirt on a spot that we'd cleared out, but try to make use of whatever natural undulations there are and in with some vegetation and things like that. I think we'll make that more in the spirit of what our regional system is supposed to be. I'm not necessarily completely convinced on all of the other things. I think you've probably heard me say that before. I'm hoping that we can get a little more guidance on that and how we do some things in the future. And some of this, it's a really fuzzy line between things where, like the creator's game was presumably without a whole lot of development traditionally anyway. Whereas it looked like maybe the futsal stuff was a bit more of a developed, flattened, cleared and painted pitch kind of thing. So I might say one of those fits into our typical traditional things and the other doesn't. I'm not sure exactly where we draw that line or how, but I'm really hoping that we can figure out some better ways to allow all of these developments to exist, but come up with some better ways of designating, what is the regional stuff, what is the not regional stuff, without quite as traditional of lines that are based on just plat maps and parcels and trying to do it that way when it's clearly coming out as a bit more nuanced than that, particularly when we're talking about trail amenities. So we'll have to spend continued time on that. So let's say I'm thrilled about some of the stuff that's happening here and also still a bit uncomfortable about some of the details. And you've all heard exactly that before.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
So, and I would say that, this is something, again, as we are developing in our kind of community engagement process and something, and again, that in terms of, what I'm thinking about this a lot. And one of the challenges that we have around community engagement is that this is a joke. I tell this all the time. If you go and you talk to a primarily African-American community and ask them what they want on an empty piece of land near their homes, they're going to say basketball courts. If you ask a Latinx community what they want, they're going to say soccer fields. It's that people in community often dream within the context of their current reality, if that makes sense. And so one of the things, and again, as much as that sounds like a stereotype, I often experience this. And sometimes when you talk to park people, they say the way that they're going to increase equity is big picnic tables, right? That kind of stuff happens. And I think that one of the things that we sometimes have to do around community engagement is also make it a process that expands the way that a community imagines what might be there, right? And there's just different ways that happens. But I will say that, that one of the experiences that particularly, the council member Lene and I have had is sitting with a group of African-American people in a park, and initially cross-country skiing is nowhere in their universe, right? It's not one of those things that they're choosing, but through talking with them about their aspirations, what their goals, what they want the end result to be, and we say, okay, we're going to try cross-country skiing, and the invitation is right and the leaders are right, all of a sudden people go, I think that's a good thing to do. So I guess I'm just say, Tony, I agree with you. And it is the catch-22 of going in community early without a preconceived idea. And once you do that, you have a responsibility to deliver on it. And so I think there's also an obligation we have as we engage the communities. And this is the community engagement process that was done for this project was really good. And I think there's something that sometimes, to your point, that when we do this, we also want to help community dream bigger or imagine things that are different. And not only that, right now, what they're designing for is what's missing. You know what I mean? Like right now, there is, they think about futsal and the creators game and the things they want because those elements are missing from, or the places that they use are packed. And so this becomes an outlet for that. So I just think that as we do engagement, there's another piece of this that we want to, start to implement in some of our engagement that does that. Because and honestly, Ms. Cecily, I think the challenge we have around lacrosse is that lacrosse has just become one more example of what upper class white people do. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate that it is a club level sport, that it has gone the way that all sports go, which is professionalized, and that part of what the indigenous community is saying is that we want to be able to do this, and we want to be able to do it differently. And the city of St. Paul is listening and creating an opportunity for that. So I hear you, Tony, and really I'm with you on a lot of it, but I also have sat in those meetings and I've watched our implementing agencies really go to community with a blank slate, and sometimes this is what happens.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. And I think this also goes to some of what you were saying earlier on the bridging facilities about how this is about a progression, not only adding some new kinds of facilities to existing places, but also figuring out how to get new people into a different kind of activity that they haven't seen before and use that to get them into different places. And how do we bridge that? And all this complication of there are different classifications of parks and trails, and there are different kinds of entities responsible for them at different layers. And how does that all interact? And it's all the stuff that traditionally government does really badly, of having a smooth, consistent interaction between those different kinds of pieces. And that's what we're struggling with. We're probably 40 years behind the curve on trying to figure out how to do that well. We're at least getting better at finding out what the stuff is that people are looking for and what their concerns are and kind of that. But figuring out how to move from that to the implementation and potentially not just adapting what we're building, but the structures of how we do it and how we provide those things and how we provide the programming that goes with those things is hard. So it will take a while.
Well, and your point, I'll tell you what, one of the things that we can be clear about is that if we have a futsal facility there, it will be actively used, and it is an opportunity lost because there will be hundreds of families when we get there. And again, the idea of progression sometimes is about extending a relationship. So we even could view futsal as a trusted relationship that we can extend into other activities that might be going on around there. We can think about it in a different way and really think about it again as a tool for relationship building and something that and trust and understand, and extend that into other opportunities because we might have boats 100 feet away. We have a pump track and bikes and an opportunity that are 100 feet away from a trusted relationship. And so again, I just think that, for us, the challenge is, we have to be true to these commitments. And at the same time, again, as I keep saying to myself, we have to help people expand the opportunities they take advantage of, and the way that we deliver on our commitment as a municipality, that these services and these experiences are available and accessible to all of our community members. And that invitation may be the one that works. So Anyway, but anyway, great job, St. Paul.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Other discussion on this motion, if any?
This is Jeremy. I have a comment going back to what I said earlier. This is another example of that spectrum problem that perhaps should be decided at a higher level to provide more clarity on what open space and trail work should look like, and then ensuring that planning occurs at larger than park unit level to assess the spectrum of needs in the appropriate place. So while I appreciate the level of engagement the City of St. Paul did, if it was not sufficiently driven to define what the universe could be, then the open popcorn style could end up proposing or committing things that would be outside of the statutory mandate for what the universe of possibility is defined as in the law. And so that would be my only concern there. And if there are other agencies considering doing more, less directed public engagement, which is obviously better to decentralize that decision making as much as possible. It's important, I would think, to make sure that those ground rules are established, or as Anthony was saying, there's more coaching on broadening the vision of what could be, to ensure that that engagement is both effective and not unduly promising or promoting possibilities that are outside the universe of what currently we believe under the statutes could happen in these spaces. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jeremy. That was a good way of putting a lot of that.
Chair, this is Councilmember Linnea. I wonder if I could chime in here for a second.
Certainly.
So I really appreciate, Jeremy, your bringing up these your concerns and questions around this. When I started, one of the things I did a lot of is really reviewing the statutes, but also understanding the history and why the commission exists. One of the great traditions of Minnesota is that, in my humble opinion, I guess, is that we have a strong balance between elected officials who have a role to play in the House and the Senate, and also a strong tradition of having appointed and other types of citizen-based bodies that work in partnership with the legislatures to make sure that there's checks and balances between politics and in politics and policy, and that there is a balance in making sure that the people of Minnesota have a voice that is equitable and representative of the population. And so I just want to offer one point, is to really look into what the commission is empowered, and also the commission is not on its own. The commission is in partnership with the implementing agencies and the council in a three-way partnership to provide guidance and oversight over the regional parks and open spaces. But I just want to offer that I don't think, and this is my opinion, that there is a higher voice, that we are a partnership and we are a representative of one of the best traditions, I think, again, in our country, which is that we have a balance in those who have a political office, those who represent the citizens because they are citizens, and the professionals who work in the different agencies that implement our park system. And so I just want to caution that, and I think that my council member colleagues would also agree and believe that as well. And I would love to be a part of conversations if they need to happen to go further into that way. But I hope what I said makes some sense. But I believe, and it's not just for this commission, but it's for many things like the Parks and Trail Legacy Advisory Committee and many, many other methods that we administer and oversee resources spent in our state and the interests that those resources are stewarding.
All right, thank you, Linnea. My sense is that we're starting to get into some big topics to sort of lay out a bit of a 2021 work plan potentially. But I want to take a moment to see, are there any other discussion things that are particularly specific to this proposal? Certainly we have other things to spend more time on at future meetings, but is there anything else that needs to be said on this right here before we move on to a vote on our motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask Sandy to proceed with a roll call for the vote on this.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with Lolita Davis Carter.
Aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Todd Kemry.
Aye.
Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Jeremy votes aye.
Nathan Rich. Nate Rich.
Aye.
Anthony Taylor.
Aye.
Rick Tyson.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. That passes, and that brings us on to our two information items. Our first one is about the 2021 Competitive Equity Grant Program priorities. We have Jessica and Amanda to speak to that. Go ahead.
Hello again, Chair and Commissioners. This is Jessica Lee, Parks Planner, presenting the program priorities for the 2021 Regional Park System Competitive Equity Grant Program. Amanda Lovely is also here and will join us for discussion at the end. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's discussion is to share this year's Equity Grant Program priorities based on what we learned from you, from the Community Development Committee, and from several meetings with the park agency's directors, planners, and outreach staff. We also want to provide a final opportunity for input on the development of the 2021 Notice of Funding Availability, which we hope to bring to you for approval in January. Next slide, please. Equity grant program proposals must clearly articulate how the project will advance equitable use of the regional park system by addressing one or more of the following equity focus areas: race, ethnicity, income, ability, age, or national origin. Next slide, please. This year we have just over $2 million available for the equity grant program. $664,000 is available for capital projects, and $1.4 million is available from parks interest earnings, which the Council has prioritized using for non-capital programming projects. Next slide, please. Capital projects may range from $20,000 to $200,000. Agencies may submit multiple grant applications for capital projects, but may not receive more than $200,000 in capital funds. Examples of capital projects include park and trail signage, mobile classrooms, accessible facilities, and public art. Capital projects may include engagement and outreach if they directly inform the project being proposed. Next slide, please. Non-capital projects may also range from $20,000 to $200,000. Again, agencies may submit multiple grant applications, but may not receive more than $200,000 in non-capital funds. Examples of programming projects include outdoor education and skill building, events, outreach, partnership building, marketing, communications, training, translation and interpretation services, developing an ADA transition plan, and new programming staff. Non-capital projects may also include budgeting for equipment valued at less than $5,000, such as basic essential outdoor equipment. Next slide, please. Again, this year there will be a review team to score the proposals and make recommendations for funding to the Council. The review team will be comprised of up to 4 Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission members, up to 3 Community Development Committee members, up to 2 Equity Advisory Committee members, and up to 3 implementing agency representatives. Next slide, please. The evaluation and scoring criteria will be similar to last year, but condensed for a much simpler review process. It will also prioritize programming, partnership building, and internal collaboration with outreach staff. The 5 review categories are impact of equitable use, community partnerships, community engagement, capacity building, and programming initiatives. Next slide, please. Projects will have a 3-year grant term with a 1-year extension possible. Agencies will be required to submit semi-annual reports so that we can track the ongoing progress of the project, and a final outcomes report will be required before their final reimbursement. Next slide, please. So after we receive final input from you and from the Community Development Committee, who we are presenting to next Monday, we will finalize the 2021 Notice of Funding Availability and bring it through the Council in January. Once that is approved, we will open the application system and accept proposals for approximately 6 weeks. After that, the staff will take a few weeks to review applications for eligibility and completeness, and then the review committee will meet to provide funding recommendations. We're hoping to bring those recommendations to the Council for approval by June. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the discussion portion of this presentation. Do these priorities reflect your priorities? Are there any areas that are unclear? And are you comfortable moving forward with the next steps? Amanda and I are happy to take questions or hear your thoughts. And also, we want to thank you for all your previous input to get us to this point.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of quick questions to start off. One was when you said that the dollar figures that are available, I know last time we did this, we had sort of some fudgy numbers of you do this much, but it would then go into the availability for the next cycle. Is there any of that this time, or is that number of this cycle only no impact on a future one?
Chair, the capital funds of $664,000 includes the 2021 amount that was set aside, but because we've taken more time to develop this program, it's basically just moving into next year. So it'll be 2020 and 2021 funding.
So it is 2 years, but the intention was to move this program to every 2 years anyway, so it's one cycle of the program.
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned in the review committee potentially having implementing agency representatives on those. Given that this is a competitive program, what guidelines do we have in mind for the eligibility or controls for any sort of appearance of conflict of interest related to that?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Chair. That's something we heard from a lot of agencies that they would like to participate. And in my previous experience, I've had applicants also serve on review committees, and it's worked out quite well. They obviously will recuse themselves from reviewing any of their own projects. They won't score their own projects, and they won't participate in the discussion on those projects. And hopefully, the goal is by serving on the review committee, it'll make their applications better. It'll make the review committee better. Like, everyone should benefit from it in the end.
Okay, and I know you said several of the implementing agencies wanted that. Were there any implementing agencies that were potentially concerned about that?
I haven't heard any concerns, no.
Okay, thank you. Those were my initial ones. What other commissioners have questions?
Hi.
Or comments on? Yes, Cecily.
Yeah, comment and some suggestions. It seems to be a very large review team. I can understand having different voices from different, bodies, but that's a really large group to work with. And I know I'm currently a reviewer for a state board and for a community foundation, and I don't think we have more than 6 or 8 people in either committee. So something to think about. But also, just a suggestion, as this grant program continues, to have some forms of evaluation, such as proposed number of people to be served, how you'll promote this program or project to the desired demographic or all demographics. Thinking about how they'll evaluate the program and perhaps what sort of match funding they'll be providing as another scoring method. I think the program's great, and you've added some very useful detail compared to last year's program. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. If I could just respond.
Yeah.
We do have, I think it's in-kind contributions or match or the various types of ways the agency is providing support to the project. We don't want to limit it to just dollar match cash because of equity reasons, but they will score higher if there's some sort of agency contribution, whether it's in-kind match. Another thing, with the review committee, we strategically set up to so many members to allow for some flexibility. Last year we had a very clear, this is who we're going to have, and we ended up in the end with less people than that. So we worded it so that there's a little bit of flexibility. We don't anticipate to have a full committee of, what is that, 12? It'll probably be less than that. But thank you for pointing that out. That's a really good observation.
This is Bob. In reviewing the program, I couldn't tell, but I didn't see any opportunity for Met Council themselves to apply for any funding or a grant from this program for things like general advertising or awareness building across the communities, rather than just related to one specific implementing agency. Are we allowing the Met Council to apply for grants as well?
That is a good question. Is it one that staff had any direction on so far, or are you leaving that up to hear from us at this point?
Chair, we haven't received any direct guidance on that yet. We would prefer to see the agencies collaborate and put in an application that would address marketing across the whole system, communications, signage, something like that. But to answer your question, no, we have not received direction on that.
Okay. I guess the other question on that is, does the council even have capacity to conduct such a project? So would they even be interested in applying? I don't know if anybody knows that at the moment either.
Chair, Commissioners, this is Nicole. If I could just jump in, maybe I could provide a little context. So because the interest earnings for this program are derived from the legacy fund, we were given direction by the council to adhere to the guidelines of expenditure for legacy funding, which would preclude the council from being an eligible applicant for that funding. So that may be part of it.
This is Bob again, just following up. Thank you for that clarification. I do think in some ways we would like to encourage more regional communication and awareness building for the parks and the trails and the amenities than might be available on just a regional or individual agency program. So however we go forward with this, I would hopefully encourage that.
Thank you, Bob. And yeah, I think one of the nice things about this, since it would be a competitive program, is it would force the council to be a little more innovative in what it thinks of for those kinds of things. So we're trying to push the council to expand some of that by suggesting this, even if it could do it through other contexts as well. So if there's other funding sources for that kind of work, great. But think about competing with these projects when designing such a thing, even if you aren't actually going to do that. I think what we're saying on that.
This is Todd.
Yes, Todd.
So I'd like to thank you, Chair. I have a question concerning part of, and let me bring this up here. The examples of programming, including, and then there's a discussion further down about, or a mention about developing an ADA transition plan. Is this for agencies that don't have a current ADA transition plan and they're providing money to develop an ADA transition plan? Or explain to me a little bit better, because I'm a little bit confused on what context this mentioning of the ADA transition plan is.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. That's a great question. The intention, and there's more specific language in the Notice of Funding Availability, but the intention is to provide a small grant for those agencies that have a plan that's older than 10 years. So they've already met the basic requirements. They have a plan, but they're just getting a little outdated. And so we want to encourage them to update those plans. And this will provide a little bit of funding incentive for them to do so. And furthermore, there's only 2 agencies that would really apply to.
Okay, I was concerned on how much of the grant money would be starting to be funneled into an ADA transition plan that should already be on file. But you have explained it to my better understanding, and I appreciate how that's working. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Anybody
Chair,
else? Yes.
This is Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Just a couple thoughts. I'm curious about, and I'd love to get maybe Todd and others feedback who participated. Are you guys all hearing that background information or noise, or is it just me?
No, I'm hearing some of that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Okay. So what I'm remembering from last year is we had a number of proposals that were made that were around, with the target audience being those who people with physical disabilities. And in some cases, they were either, if I recall correctly, they were either doing things they should already be doing, so they didn't fall into that new category, or there were examples where an agency put together a plan, but it felt to the review committee that there wasn't a lot of engagement of folks within the ADA community in the development of the plan or the proposal, or it just wasn't maybe with fidelity, and that really limited those projects that would benefit the community from being successful. I'm just wondering if there's a way, if that sounds familiar or accurate to those who participated in the review last year, and 2, is there a way for us to share that feedback and guidance more specifically and clearly this time, so that there are projects that come in that aren't about, like Commissioner Hearn said, filling the gaps, the things they should already be doing, but are getting us to a place where they're offering really innovative, exciting, and meaningful opportunities for people that have physical disabilities. I hope that was understandable and clear. I'm happy to clarify if it wasn't.
Yes, thank you, Linnea. That does sound familiar to me. There were a few that kind of fell into that category. I know we filled out some surveys and feedback to staff about some changes for the next time this went through. Potentially staff can speak to what was done as a result of that feedback that might address this kind of thing.
Oh, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. We're hoping that the scoring criteria will better reflect some of those concerns this year. We've also simplified it so it's easier to understand. I
have a question. This is Lolita. I'm going to back up just a little bit. I've just been doing some reading. And I'm going back to the requirements, and it's talking about agencies can submit multiple grant applications, but no agency can get over a dollar amount, $200,000. Okay, so when you say multiple applications, so you're saying that they can submit about 5 applications and get funded for 5 times in a variety of different areas? I'm not understanding that component of it, maybe. That's why I had to read more. And I'm sorry I'm late. It takes me time to read it. And I was just didn't make sense to me. I'm a reviewer on the state level, and I'm a monitor too on the state and federal level. So I'm just wondering, how are you guys going to break that up as relates to, are they going to tell you what they're going to use the dollar amount for? Or are they going to submit one application and then they're going to use it for all components? How are you guys going to evaluate that? How is that? I wasn't here last year, so I just want a better understanding. How's that done?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Chair and commissioners, they will be allowed to submit as many applications as they want. We would want a different application for each specific project. We don't anticipate most agencies submitting more than a few. And
so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Jessica. So you're saying that they can't use one application to get all this funding. They got to submit separate applications. Because sometimes what grantees do is they use one application and they apply for the same, for different dollar amounts, but they're not changing the language in their application. But you're asking them to change the language, so that will come with that evaluation component of it that there's earlier talking about, or
yep,
maybe I'm just not understanding this process.
That's correct. The application will ask several questions that they'll have to fill in for the project scope and what, their project outcomes, what they hope to do. And it can look different for everyone. Someone might submit one for $200,000. Someone might submit 2 for $50,000 that are different projects. It's up to the agencies, but ultimately they can only receive up to $200,000 in each funding category.
But they do got to submit separate applications. Basically, that's what my point is. They got to submit separate applications. They can't just use one application for multiple funding avenues and paths.
That's correct.
Journeys. Okay, thank you. I was just making sure.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Any other feedback we have on this? Or are we getting about ready? Yes, Linnea.
This is just going back to that last piece. I guess I would just give a recommendation that staff could provide a companion document, doesn't need to be complex, about lessons learned from the last round. That might be a way so that they're not waiting till they see the rubric and we're looking to interpret. I think that, to me, the big missing piece was the ADA projects. So I kind of feel like maybe it warrants just calling that out directly and providing like clear guidance. Don't do these things again, or please do this, something like that. I'd really like to see ADA projects come through and be successful.
Sure. Okay. I'm seeing nodding, so it sounds like that makes sense. All right. Staff, do you feel like you have the guidance you need for the moment?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for your feedback.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we'll move on to our last piece here. I know we're going pretty long tonight, but there's a lot on our plate. Our last thing is Parks and Trails Legacy Project Equity Highlights. We're getting a glimpse into some of the more equity-focused components of legacy projects coming up for this next year. And we have Jessica again, as well as people from various agencies. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. One more time for the record, this is Jessica Lee, Parks Planner. Presenting the Regional Park System fiscal year 22 and 23 Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Projects Overview and Equity Highlights in collaboration with the City of St. Paul, Anoka County, Three Rivers Park District, Scott County, and Washington County. Next slide, please. So the purpose of today's discussion is to present the proposed Parks and Trails Legacy Fund projects for the fiscal year 22 and 23 biennium. 5 agencies will present their list of projects today and highlight a project designed to advance equitable use of the regional park system. These agencies are City of St. Paul, Anoka County, Three Rivers, Scott County, and Washington County. And the remaining 5 agencies will present their projects at the January 7th MPOSC meeting. Next slide, please. So the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund was created to support parks and trails of statewide or regional significance after the passage of the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment in 2008. This amendment increased the state sales tax by 0.3%, and along with the Parks and Trails Fund, established the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, the Clean Water Fund, and the Outdoor Heritage Fund. The use of the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund is directed by the 25-year Parks and Trails Legacy Plan, which established 4 strategic directions or pillars for the fund. These 4 pillars are connect people in the outdoors, acquire land and create opportunities, take care of what we have, and coordinate among partners. All projects must meet the priorities of one or more of these pillars. The Council receives an appropriation each biennium for the regional park system. The estimated funding for fiscal year 22 and 23 is $44 million. Of this amount, 10% is set aside for the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program. The remaining funds are allocated to the implementing agencies based on a formula driven by O&M shares, population, and non-local park visits. Next slide, please. The implementing agencies have all submitted their list of potential projects for fiscal years 22 and 23 in preparation for the upcoming legislative session. This list is attached to the information item. Please note that these projects could change due to final funding allocations or agency board direction. Agencies are also asked to identify the legacy pillars for each project and any equity components. I'll now ask agency staff to present their list of projects and highlight one that has been designed to advance equitable use of the regional park system. Next slide, and first up is City of St. Paul.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member, my name is Paul Sawyer, and I'm with St. Paul Parks and Recreation. Thank you for this opportunity to talk a bit about the legacy projects and programs that we have proposed for the next 2 fiscal years. It's a great mix of projects that does a bit of rehabilitating some existing infrastructure, adding some new features that have been identified in master plans, and also doing some additional planning work and supporting some ongoing programming that we have used these dollars for in the past. And so just very quickly going through this list, the Fish Hatchery Trail, it is a major trail just downstream from Lower Landing that you heard about earlier. This trail had a catastrophic slope failure in 2016. We have a temporary patch out there to keep the trail open during warm weather, but this project will create a permanent fix for this trail, and so we're going to get that underway. We're looking to add a dog park and rehabilitate a play area at Harriet Island and Lilydale. We're implementing the Hidden Falls Crosby Farm master plan that came through this body earlier this year. And so that will include some work rehabilitating some parking lots, adding some trail connections, and improving flow through the park and into adjacent areas. The Phelan project I'll speak about in a second. Next slide. And then so in addition to the other Phelan project that I'll speak about, we are looking to design the picnic pavilion area. It's heavily used, but is quite outdated at this point. And so we're looking to take a fresh look at that and rehabilitate or renovate the pavilion out there, preparing a master plan for Mississippi Gorge Regional Park, the portion of the park that's in St. Paul to complement the portion of the park that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board completed a master plan for over the last couple of years. We have some staff positions, the shuttle out at Como, and some work specifically around the regional parks and trails in the River Valley that has been done by us in the past and is proposed to be continued. And then the final 2 here are implementing the master plan amendment that you just heard, as well as constructing some trails within Cherokee Heights on the west side. Next slide. Thank you. To focus in a bit on one project that we wanted to highlight at Lake Phalen, for those of you who are familiar, the park is surrounding the lake, which is long and narrow, kind of along a north-south axis, and so the park is mostly divided into the west side of the lake and the east side of the lake, and a significant amount of the development and usage of the park is on the west side of the lake. And so what we're hoping to do with this project is to activate the east side of the lake a bit more. We were fortunate that an acquisition that was identified in the master plan came up on the market last year. The council and this body approved a PAOF grant for the acquisition of that property, which has freed up space for us to be able to implement this trailhead. In addition to that, we have been engaging with the Rush Line Project Office, which will be bringing bus rapid transit through this area as well. And so there's going to be some improvements with that project, as well as better regional transit connections to this area. And so we've been very careful to engage with that project team to make sure that the project is being designed around connections to the park and the Bruce Vento Regional Trail, which is right next to here. And so when we did the master plan engagement in 2011, we heard a lot of feedback from the community that centered around a few kind of main areas. One of which is support for safer bike and ped connections throughout the park. Throughout Phalen, clearer trail alignments. There's a great network of trails through the park. There's also the regional trail just to the east of the park, and better connections and clearer connections of that trail system was something that was brought up by the community. And then there was also overwhelming support for more public restrooms throughout the park, not just on the east side, but throughout the park. That it was seen as a very limiting facility for users of our park. So on the east side of the lake, as I mentioned, there isn't a tremendous amount of development. There is a trail that follows along the lake. There's the regional trail, but there are no drinking fountains. There are no bathrooms. And so you can get into some parts of that part of the park where you're 2 miles away from those types of facilities. And we've found that that is really limiting for our youngest and oldest visitors, those with mobility challenges. And so in an effort to open this part of the park up to more people who really could use a very beautiful and more secluded part of the park, we're proposing to construct a trailhead at the kind of nexus of the regional trail and halfway around the east side of the lake that will include a restroom facility, will include drinking fountains, benches, and kind of be a stopping point and connection to the neighborhood to the east as well, because this will be a place where we can invite the nearby community into the regional park and into the regional trail. And so we will be engaging these communities specifically as part of project development and making sure that the surrounding neighborhood and many of the children that live in the area, as well as there's some senior housing that would be connected from the regional trail. And so making sure that these communities who specifically could be brought into the regional park and made feel more welcome here with these facilities are engaged. And so that's going to be something that we're going to do a lot of intentional engagement on once we reach this point. And I think I'm about at my time, so I would open this up to questions.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions on that presentation? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so my name's Karen Blaska. I'm the park planner for Anoka County. And so our projects are, a lot of them are taking care of what we have. So out at Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve, we have an entrance road that really needs some help, and so we're going to be working on that. and doing some equity enhancements with that project. Our natural resource management, we've done this with the CCM crews for the last few years. They've really helped us be able to advance our work in our natural resource management. So that's always a pleasure to work with them. And then at our Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park, we've got a culvert for Coon Creek within the park that really needs to be rebuilt, and then we need to also redo the trail that crosses that creek. And then at Bunker Hills, we need to reconstruct the roof at our activity center there at the park. So the next slide, please. So in looking at our projects, we wanted to focus on our Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park and the road project. Granted, road reconstruction doesn't do a whole lot to advance equity other than provide better access, but we had worked with a student group from Centennial High School that developed after the murder of George Floyd. And so we worked with them to kind of gather information on some things they would like to see in the parks and some ideas on what would help engage them in the parks. And so we kind of wanted to take some of their ideas and use them in this project just to kind of give them a nod and say, we heard you. We want to give you something or make something available to you right away. So that's why we're trying to include these equity enhancements with our road project. So when we did talk with them, one of the things was, you know, some of them still, of course, were not aware of everything the park has to offer. And because they're a diverse student group, we wanted to try and do some events with them. But of course, with this pandemic, that's not happening anytime soon. So we're still trying to figure out some things we could do to work with them on a project. They were very interested in being able to do some community service hours and things like that. So, you know, there's a lot we can do with them to help raise awareness amongst youth. Then we also talked to them about safety and security. And so they had definite thoughts, lighting and visibility. And so we wanted to take some of those ideas and incorporate that into the project, just to ensure their comfort levels when they are in the park are at, so they are comfortable in the parks. And then let's see, one of the last things was just things that would entice them to come into the park and to have them stay for a while. They talked a lot about just space to hang out. So bringing up the topic of picnic tables. So just groups of picnic tables or benches that are together, that face each other. They talked about areas for hammocking. And so we wanted to try and figure out how we could, you know, put something together near the beach area out in the park that would work for hammocking. And what, of course, everybody always says is they want photo opportunities. So something, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the I Like You wall in Northeast Minneapolis, but it's just a white brick wall that has I Like You sort of graffitied across it, and everybody goes there to take their photos so they can upload them to social media. So we wanted to try and include some sort of art component like that in these equity enhancements we would do. So the image on the right, I had one of our designers just put together some things based on what we heard, with the idea being that we would work with them directly as we develop this project. But so it's got some picnic tables. There's some built up walls that we were actually thinking we could maybe work with local artists or students to paint and, provide a mural of or something like that. The hammocking area we kind of included in that just because I think that's going to be an easy add. We can do posts instead of having them hang their hammocks on our trees. And then photo opportunities. So flower gardens and, just making things a little prettier for them. So those were our ideas and our kind of youth-focused equity enhancements we want to do with for our Rice Creek project. So I guess with that, I will take questions.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions on that one? All right, if not, we can move on to the others. Go ahead.
I guess it's my turn. Hello, I'm Jonathan Flaming with Three Rivers Park District. I am here this evening to talk about our one project for the biennium for the legacy. And that is the complete redevelopment of Mississippi Gateway Regional Park. Next slide, please. So the question was, what communities are you working to better serve with this project? Well, this project, the complete rebuild, is guided by an extensive and inclusive master plan that re-envisioned the entire park. Its primary focus on input was people of color, households with incomes of $50,000 or less, persons 45 or older, people with an education level of high school or less, non-English speaking persons, persons with English as a second language, and other non-park users. Next slide, please. And the next question, the entire park and its facilities are designed to meet the needs of the underserved populations as identified in the master plan. We did extensive outreach with those folks. We heard what they were looking for, and this park is really, the plan designed the entire park to act as an introduction to nature-based parks, and then also as a transitional space, primarily through programming of outdoor recreation skills and nature. So people can go there and feel comfortable in a relatively urban setting at the front door, at the gateway itself, and then work their way through, learn about the animals and the flora and fauna in the park, and then also learn outdoor skills. And the farther south they go in the park, the more wild it gets. It starts off with paved trails, ends up with dirt trails at the very far end. We're really excited about this. Very thankful to the Legacy Program and to the Met Council for being supportive of this project, and we're looking forward to getting it built. And that's it for my presentation. I only had one project. Did I freeze up?
Are there any
Jonathan,
questions?
that was great. Thank you very much. Who's next, Jessica?
Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, hi Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Delgado, and I'm here from Scott County. While we have 3 projects, I want to talk about the Spring Lake Regional Park Development Project for our highlight today. Next slide. Thanks. So for some context, Spring Lake Regional Park is located on the border of Prior Lake and Spring Lake Townships and has a master plan that was completed in 2006. Currently, the northern portion of the park has a network of paved trails that connect into adjacent neighborhoods as well as a dog off-leash area. Today, we're highlighting the development of the lakeside parcel shown on the map and by the aerial imagery that is set to start construction in 2021, set to start a community engagement process in 2021, building on previous engagement from the master plan. As this project is a phased project, construction is expected to start in 2022 to build new amenities to enjoy the lakeside geography, including picnicking, a fishing pier, an accessible canoe and kayak launch, and more. Next slide. So the planned amenities that I mentioned help serve some of our gap areas and address equity concerns within the categories of income, ability, and race. As research suggests that lower income residents may be more attracted to low-cost activities such as trails, picnicking, and non-motorized boating and fishing, this project responds with the planned construction of a free accessible canoe and kayak launch, picnic areas, fishing pier, and lakeside observation. As well, our conversations with residents have indicated that more accessible recreation access, especially water recreation access, is needed within Scott County. Again, this project is responding with the planned construction of a free accessible canoe and kayak launch. Finally, research suggests that picnic and fishing areas may be more often used by non-white park users within our park. Again, this project responds with the planned construction of a free accessible canoe kayak launch, picnic areas, a fishing pier, trails, and lakeside observation. Next slide. So as shown by the timeline on the first slide, the master plan process in 2006 set a vision for the park and this project site. As that was some time ago, next year in 2021, we will carry out a community engagement process to confirm a vision from today's vantage point on new conversations and understanding. However, since 2006, Scott County has been continuously engaging with and learning from the community while building and sustaining our relationship. A key example that I want to highlight of a growing relationship and active partnership with this park is with the Shakopee and Wakaton Sioux community. The SMSC was a part of the master planning team, helping to plan for the park trails that would connect directly to surrounding neighborhoods, 2 of which are tribal neighborhoods. And since that time, the county and the SMSC have partnered at this park on a number of things, including natural resource management efforts, volunteer events, and nature-based programming, as well as a partnership with the Shakopee High School. Another example from our engagement that we want to highlight today is event-based. In 2018, with the recognition that certain groups in the community are not coming to our park, the county started a new free family event at the park called Trailgate. This was the first event in a Scott County or Three Rivers Park where we developed non-English language promotional materials and published Spanish language social media posts. It was also the first time that we worked to engage leaders in the community to help disseminate the materials and had a community leader on our planning team. In this case, we were especially hoping to reach residents of Shakopee, non or low proficiency English speakers, and lower income populations. At this event, we also received input on what individuals wanted to see as a part of the future lakefront development project, which I'm highlighting today. Their answers are highlighted on the right and show that the top 2 of the 3 most popular choices for both 2018 and 2019 were waterside options. Thank you all for listening to this highlight of our project. Patty Freeman, the General Manager of Scott County Parks, is standing by to assist me with any questions.
All right, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Jonathan, before that. I didn't get in there. Any questions on this one?
This is Todd.
Yes, Todd.
Thank you, Chair. I just a quick consideration to Scott County, and I appreciate the focus on the accessible docks and especially the canoeing aspect of everything. The accessible canoeing and kayaking that is beginning to be a popular choice among a lot of the local lakes here, and so it's good to see that Scott County is including that. What I'd like to do is maybe mention when you get to the part about ordering the picnic tables that you would consider for some of the picnic areas that are closer to your accessible trail that you would install accessible picnic tables. For power chairs and some of the larger mobility devices, including manual chairs, it's difficult to maneuver or to be able to, without causing a complete mess with your plate of food, to use the normal picnic tables that are out there. So there is more and more companies out there developing accessible picnic tables of various designs, and I would encourage you to look into that if you need that. If you need further connections with that or guidance on that, I'll be more than happy to offline and away from tonight to be able to explain that more in detail. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for that,
Todd.
Commissioner.
Anybody else? Okay, sounds like we can move on.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners and Council Member. This is Sandy Brewer, Washington County Parks Director. I just want to do a sound check to make sure that you can hear me. So can someone confirm?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. Washington County has 3 projects to share with you tonight. The first is the Central Greenway Regional Trail and Lake Elmo Park Reserve Trail improvements. The Central Greenway Regional Trail route includes an existing paved trail and trailhead within Lake Elmo Park Reserve. Implementation will include resurfacing or rehabilitating existing paved trails to meet regional standards and, where needed, rerouting the trail. The project will also include improvements to the trailhead area, signage, and wayfinding improvements. Our second project is the St. Croix Bluffs Regional Park Hilltop Shelter and Play Area improvements. The project scope includes updates and site improvements to a large group picnic shelter and 2 play areas at St. Croix Bluffs Regional Park. And our third project is the Point Douglas Regional Trail trailhead improvements. The existing trailhead building will be replaced or renovated to better serve the regional trail visitors. Facility renovations may include improvements to the existing restrooms, staff and storage area, ventilation system, exterior and roof. Next slide, please. The project Washington County is focusing on or highlighting this evening is the Point Douglas Park and Regional Trail project. This site is located in Denmark Township at the confluence of 2 federally protected rivers, the Mississippi and the St. Croix. It connects 2 states, Wisconsin and Minnesota, 3 counties, Washington County, Dakota County, and Pierce County, and 4 regional trail systems, Dakota County, Washington County, Prescott, and the future St. Croix Valley. The trail travels along the backwaters and main channel of the Mississippi River, offering many scenic vistas. There are currently 2 20-plus-year-old facilities that serve the existing park and trail, which requires repairs and must be replaced or renovated to meet the current and future demands. This project was identified as an immediate need in a 2018 study of Washington County parks and trail system facilities. A new or updated trailhead facility will provide equity enhancements with accessibility and mobility benefits to park and trail users. The current facilities are outdated and do not provide ADA accessible restrooms or staff facilities. A newer updated facility will be designed to industry standards and best practices for accessibility. Furthermore, the mobility of our users will be improved by upgrading the adjacent connections to the park's beach and the regional trail. Additionally, a 2.5 miles and flat topography, this trail is an ideal trail for first-time trail users. As part of this project, the county will consider landscaping, bike parking, and wayfinding improvements. These amenities will help make the experience of this regional trail easier and more accessible for all. The ultimate scope of the specific improvements will be determined by the funding from multiple sources and comprehensive design processes. As with all our projects, Washington County will do additional stakeholder engagement during the design phase. If anyone has any additional questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that one, commissioners?
Chair, just a quick one from Todd.
Yes.
Sandy, thank you for your presentation. I'll make this as brief as possible. So it's more or less a comment or a consideration for your accessible upgrades, which is excellent and great presentation on this. And but when you get to your play areas, I might wonder if you might consider some of the special needs that autistic children have. There are certain parameters that help in the play area section and for accessibility. And if you need to have any ideas on that, or if you're already aware of that, just to consider that when you put your play areas in, are you considering the accessibility part of everything? Thank you.
Chair and Commissioner, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, Washington County takes that into consideration whenever we do designs of playground. We recently did an upgrade to our campground playground area, and we did all poured in place so that it was easier for, say, wheelchair accessibility. We're also taking that in mind as we build more ramps in Essential rather than ladders and steps so that there's better accessibility for children. And when we design those, we will definitely take those considerations into play. So thank you for mentioning that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, I believe that wraps us up for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless staff have any other things to add, I think that takes us on to our reports.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank real quick all the agencies for their presentations tonight, and we look forward to next month's.
All right, thank you. Okay, for reports, I don't think I have anything other than if you know of anybody in the first 4 districts that you think should consider applying for a term on this commission, go and encourage them to do so. Most people need a bit of prodding to sign up for such a thing. So go let them know that you think that they'd be good, and we'll see if we can get as many people applying to that as possible to make sure we have a good pool to choose from. Any commissioner reports?
Actually, this is Cecily. I do have one.
Yes.
Recently, we had the 3rd TAC meeting of Washington County Square Lake Master Plan. And staff told us what a wonderful job Todd Kemery did in sharing perspectives on accessibility in the Square Lake area. So it was really exciting to hear one of our commissioners is playing a role in one of the implementing agencies' projects. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Cicely. I did go out there on a blustery day, but it wasn't raining, and I had a great time. We had a great time going over everything. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioner reports? Staff reports.
Good evening, commissioners. Todd, you're everywhere. I have 2 very brief reports. The first is just what Tony, our chair, said. The Parks and Open Space Commission openings, districts A through D, and our chair. We are getting applications. We appreciate the interests of the incumbents, and we are planning to hold interviews in early January. So our council member, Linnea Atlas Engebretson, and staff are working on that. So thank you. Then I just wanted to mention we are preparing for the 2021 state legislative session that's set to begin in January. This will be a year where the legislature appropriates legacy funds and operation and maintenance funds. I also want to just say that they will also be considering an LCCMR bill. So really excited about those 3 items. So stay tuned. We will keep you up to date on those. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Emmett. And my best wishes to your IT people that get to deal with that closet. I know how that goes. So with that, I believe we are ready to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for the long meeting especially.